And a very warm welcome. You're joining us this week once again at Hyde Park on Derana 24. Of course, a day after President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his address to the nation, announced Sri Lanka's debt restructuring program achieved with the official creditor committee and the Exim Bank of China for debt relief for more than 90% and also up to 2032. Of course, debt relief for more than about 10%. But we thought we'll talk about how Sri Lanka is going to manage the debt issue and going forward about elections. We've invited to our studios the Deputy Leader of the United National Party, the party of President Ranil Wickremesinghe, and Senior Advisor to the President on Climate Change, Ruwan Wijewardene. A very warm welcome.
Thank you for having me.
A day after the good news speech.
Yes.
A lot of conversation circulated in terms of what this good news would be. And now politicians say this good news is really not good.
Well, the opposition would always say that something good is not good. I guess the opposition's role is to always say something against what the government is doing. But I think what President Ranil Wickremesinghe has been doing for the past, for 2 years is amazing for this country. Look, I think people have forgotten, 2 years ago we were a bankrupt country. I remember when President Wickremesinghe at that time, when he was appointed as Prime Minister, the first day I was with him at the Prime Minister's office, and we did not have money to buy fuel. There was a shipment of fuel that was outside Colombo, and we didn't have money. And he, at that point, had to get some of the corporate leaders in this country, get some of the owners of banks, private banks as the state banks as well, to come in and basically said, look, you all are more richer than the state of Sri Lanka at the moment, and we need money to buy shipment of fuel. We didn't have $10 million at that point. And today, we have a reserve of $5.5 billion US. So from that to this, President Wickremesinghe has been doing a tremendous job. And what we did yesterday was, we signed with the OCC, the official creditor committee, which is co-chaired by India, Japan, and France, and with all the other mainly European countries as well as the US. And then, of course, with the China Exim Bank. And what it basically has done is given us some room till 2027. We don't have to pay any capital. And then, from then on, we start paying. And we have time till 2042 to 2043 to pay off all our debt, $10 billion. So that gives us time to recover, for our economy to recover. That 3 years, then we will have to use that money to do our education, to do our health sector, infrastructure, so that I think it's a win-win scenario for the country. And I mean, this is after doing negotiations with not only our creditor countries, but with the IMF. It has been very complex negotiations. And remember, when you go into negotiations, usually if you take, for example, two companies, they always try to come into some equal ground when you start negotiating. But here, we are a bankrupt nation. We didn't have enough resources, we didn't have enough foreign exchange to pay off our debt. Bankrupt country, going into negotiations with the IMF as well as our creditor countries. So, I mean, it was extremely hard to do these negotiations. But from what we have achieved, what President Wickremesinghe has achieved, is to give us 3 years to start paying. For 3 years, we have time to get our economy, back in order. And then from then on till 2042, we have time to pay off the $10 billion, both to the China as well as to the Paris Club. So, I mean, the opposition can always sit back and criticize, I mean, they can say, oh, we could do better, we could have done better in the negotiations and all. I mean, look, you need the right leadership. You need a person to steer the country in the right direction. And I don't think the opposition has that leadership. I don't think they have the political capacity to take hard decisions. They always talk. They always come forward and say, we'll do it better. We can do it. I mean, we had one part of the opposition saying we don't need the IMF, and one part of the opposition saying, oh, we can do better negotiations with the IMF. It's all rhetoric. I mean, they don't have the political will to take this forward, or do they have the right leadership to take this forward?
Are you saying that President Ranil Wickremesinghe is taking these decisions without the support of his government, the government of then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who did not find solutions to these issues? Or is this a collective effort put together by the cabinet, the government and the president?
No, it is a collective. It is definitely a collective. He does have the support of his government. I think, this is prime example that the right leadership can, take this country forward. Look, most politicians, most leaders will always try to make decisions in order to win their elections. And President Wickremesinghe is taking, he's taking very tough decisions. Increasing taxation, this is something that the IMF has been pushing us to do. This is not popular decisions. This is not, when you usually, take an IMF program forward, it usually has an impact on your voter base because they are not popular decisions to be taken. But President Wickremesinghe is taking these decisions because he's thinking of the country. It's not thinking about him being re-elected. He's not thinking about the election. He's thinking about the country and leaving, getting this country out of debt, and then making it a very progressive country in the future for our future generations.
But with a presidential election around the corner, there is conversation that most of these decisions are carefully planned and organized in such a way to be announced as the election approaches.
Well, look, these negotiations that has been happening, it's not targeting the presidential election. It's a very, these are complex negotiations. First you have to negotiate with the IMF. The IMF has the debt sustainability analysis that they do in a country. And then they will give you recommendations, goals, and targets on how to achieve sustainability. These are not easy targets to achieve. Then for us to achieve them, they will say, you have to raise taxation, you have to get more money into the government, and they give us a framework. And that framework, we have to take that framework and then negotiate with the creditor countries. And we have to, use that to negotiate with the OCC and with the China Exim Bank. These are very complex negotiations. If you are looking at an election and negotiating that, I don't think you can come into a proper solution for the country.
Before I go into talk about debt, I'd like to talk about the election and politics a little. Of course, the United National Party, your deputy leader, needs to work hard to get your campaign together, to get your voter base really to back you, because the UNP was voted out. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, on his national list seat, became president during the period of the crisis. This is a challenging period for the United National Party, but there are claims that the UNP is riding on the back of the government's efforts and the president's efforts to emerge from the crisis for the UNP to make space in Parliament.
Well, the United National Party, yes, in the last general election, we suffered a loss, but that's because the party broke into two. Our deputy leader, Sajid Premadasa, broke away, formed his own party, the SJB, and obviously our voter base split into two. And in the last general election, nearly 200,000 UNPs didn't go to vote either. They stayed away from voting. So now, with what President Wickremesinghe has been doing, we've been backing President Wickremesinghe. I think even before he became Prime Minister, we all stuck with, me as a deputy leader, actually, if I wanted to be in parliament, I would have gone with Sajid. I mean, it would have been easy for me to win an election because we knew what was going to happen in that general election.
But are you saying that without opposition leader Sajid Premadasa, who was deputy leader of the United National Party, and the faction of the SJB, that the United National Party couldn't work to win an election?
Yeah, I mean, once the party split, obviously the confidence of our supporter went down. You had one part of our voter base moving away and joining up with Sajid Premadasa, and you had another part of our voter base that went silent and didn't vote. So, but I've always been in the stance saying that these two groups have to come together.
Is there a possibility that these
I think there is a possibility.
Are you in conversation, in negotiation with the SJB?
I have been talking to some of the SJB MPs who've been in parliament with me, who's been in provincial council with me, and their thoughts are the same, that at one point these two sides have to come together. So I'm hopeful.
What are the chances that the United National Party and the Sri Lanka Pudujana Peramuna, the SLPP, will work together for an upcoming election?
Well, there's talks. There's talk about an alliance because President Wickremesinghe is coming as a common candidate. He's not coming as a UNP candidate. And right now you have a lot of SLPP MPs and ministers who are quite keen on supporting Mr. Wickremesinghe. Their party leadership has also been in talks with President Wickremesinghe. So him being the leader of the United National Party, we've always supported his efforts. So there has not been a negotiations between or conversation between the SLPP and the UNP at the moment. But I think at some point, if President Wickremesinghe is coming forward for the election as a common candidate, then I think there can be an alliance between not only between the SLPP, the UNP, but other parties as well.
In the past presidential elections, the UNP has pioneered bringing forward common candidates from General Sarath Fonseca, Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca, to former President Maithripala Sirisena. But your alliance with former President Maithripala Sirisena didn't work. So do you think a coalition in a future election will really work for the interests of the country?
I think it will work. I think right now, look, if you look at what the Hapana government under President Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe at the time, we did not have enough time to even get to know President Sirisena before he became our candidate, right? It was only after he became president that we started working with him, and then obviously we found that it didn't gel properly. I mean, there were so many issues. But here, President Wickremesinghe has been working with the SLPP government for some time, and they, especially the younger ministers, I think they have really warmed up to President Wickremesinghe, and they find it very easy to work with him. So I believe if there is an alliance, and if that alliance wins the next general election, I think it won't be an issue for us to work with President Wickremesinghe.
You were appointed as senior advisor to the president on climate change. Why climate change? How did this come about as soon as the appointment of the president? I think you were brought in. Is it because you were close to the president as deputy leader of the United National Party, or what's your background on climate?
No, in fact, I had been working with the former president of Maldives, President Nasheed, who was actually very active in the climate world. He is right now the general secretary of the Climate Vulnerable Forum. So I've been actually working with him on various climate-related issues. And because of that, when Mr. Wickremesinghe became president, he chose me as the senior advisor on the climate change issues. Because climate change is actually, if you look at it, I mean, it's a lot of people look at climate change subject as an environment subject or a subject that deals with the weather. It's much broader than that. Climate change, actually, if you look at it, it cuts across a lot of subjects, a lot of ministries. And it's all to do about how climate affects the economy of a country. I mean, as you know, if you take Sri Lanka for an example, the changing of the climate affects our food security, it affects our agriculture, our irrigation, and of course the infrastructure. So all this has an enormous impact on our economy. And because of that, it's a vast subject. It's a vast subject. And most countries are looking at climate change because how it's going to affect their economy. President Wickremesinghe is one of the, I think, one of the leaders that actually recognize this properly. I know that President Gotabaya also was looking at climate issues and all, but I think it was President Wickremesinghe when he came, he had a broad understanding of climate issues. And so his vision is actually to have a green economy for Sri Lanka, so that we protect our environment while we become a developed country. There's always, you know, this debate has been going on for years. How do we, you know, become a developed country while preserving our environment? But now, I think, especially countries like Sri Lanka, the environment is key for our development. I mean, if you look at our tourism industry, most tourists come here to look at the beauty of our country, to look at the environment, and there is a different economy that is building up on a climate set. If you look at debt restructuring, you have things like debt to nature swaps that countries can, you know, negotiate with their creditor countries to cut off part of the debt and use that money for environmental projects. There's various things that are now coming up. You are looking at carbon credits, which you can sell off and get more money into your country. So it's about how you, while preserving your environment, how you build your economy as well. So that's pretty much what President Wickremesinghe is trying to do.
I think there was conversation on debt to nature swaps and climate financing. President Wickremesinghe spoke about it, and also a UK-based non-profit International Institute for Environment and Development revealed that debt for nature swaps could provide up to $100 billion for developing and poor countries to fight against climate change. Mm-hmm. Where does Sri Lanka stand here? And secondly, also, President said that Sri Lanka must find funds to combat climate change. Why must a country like Sri Lanka find money to combat climate change when we are at the receiving end? Mm-hmm. and we have about $50 billion in external debt? Mm-hmm.
So this is, I think, an issue that not only for Sri Lanka, but if you look at countries in the global south, it's an issue, which is why President Wickremesinghe brought two initiatives last year at the COP. One was the Climate Justice Forum initiative, and one was the Tropical Belt Initiative. And both of these initiatives, if you take the Climate Justice Forum initiative, it's basically countries in the global south, mainly developing countries like us, who are facing the brunt of climate issues, but also debt-ridden. So what this initiative is there's a collective of these countries asking their creditor countries to give us some kind of leeway, give us, cut off some of the debt, so that we can use that money to protect our own environment and all, and to mitigate the impact on these climate issues that we are facing. The second one is the Tropical Belt Initiative. So the Tropical Belt Initiative is basically, if you look at the countries that are with the equator and between the equator and the Cape of Cancer and the Cape of Capricorn, there are roughly about 143 countries. And within these 143 countries, you have a significant amount of population living in these countries. Most of the biodiversity is in the waters, in the seas, as well as in the land of these countries. And of course, that whole area the scientists believe is the climate modulator of the Earth. So this is where, if you, and of course the rainforest, everything is situated in most of these countries. So the Tropical Belt Initiative is basically asking countries in the global north, the developed countries, to invest more in countries in the tropical belt, and the 143 countries, because these countries are the most economically vulnerable countries as well as climate vulnerable countries. So the initiative is to ask developed countries to invest more on renewable energy in these countries, and on environment project, on preserving the rainforests. And so through that, so he's not looking at only Sri Lanka, he's looking at it in a global perspective. And this initiative that he put forward at the COP last year has now gained momentum. We had countries like Brazil and all quite interested in these initiatives and wanting to come in. So we want to take this initiative forward, because not only will it help Sri Lanka, but it will help most of the countries in the global south.
How much progress has made? You've had discussions with several leaders, including President Emmanuel Macron of France, and a report is expected of the initiative from a panel of experts on this. So how will this progress? Because Sri Lanka doesn't have really a lot of time to figure out how to come out of this crisis. The debt restructure has been announced, true, but Sri Lanka has to find solutions to other issues as well.
Yes, we've been working quite closely with some of the countries that are interested in coming to help on the climate issues. We are working very closely with some of the organizations like the Climate Vulnerable Forum. You have the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon's GGGI, you have UNDP, you have Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we've been also working with all these organizations as well to do, from mangrove protection, cultivation, to various climate related initiatives in Sri Lanka. So then we're getting a lot of support from these countries, and the third initiative that the President proposed at the COP was to form an international climate university in Sri Lanka. This is a total international university. He's looking at getting multi-stakeholders coming in. So that has really caught the attention of the international community as well. We are to sign an MOU with one of the universities from Australia. China is very interested, India is interested, France is interested. So there's a lot of interest coming in, and we have Korea Exim Bank wanting to fund us to build infrastructure for the university as well. So our President's vision is to make this a place for all the climate scientists to come and do their research. And he wants to have one arm of that university based in Maldives to study the impact of the climate on the Indian Ocean. So this has generated a lot of interest in the international community.
When would this interest really translate into action, inking of agreements, and something concrete coming up?
Very soon, actually. So what we've been doing is we've been sitting with some of the professors who have been working in the climate field in Sri Lanka, as well as some international, to actually bring up a framework of what subjects, what areas that we will be looking into. So we are on the MOU with some of the universities, international universities are ready to sign. I think within the next 1 or 2 months we'll be start putting ink to paper. And I believe by the end of the year we can start working on the infrastructure of the university.
What is the kind of investment that is needed for the university, the physical university, as well as bringing together these international academia as well as other know-how to the country?
It's significant amount actually. We are, not only are we talking with Korea, and the Korean Exim Bank has agreed, but we are looking for funding from other international donors as well as some other countries. So it does need a significant amount of money.
Do you have a figure that you can share with us that will be invested from the Sri Lankan side, and as well as that you will look for international support?
Well, no, we don't have. I think it's, I can say roughly about maybe $50 to $70 million. I think we are looking at. I think we haven't got a total figure yet because the framework is being, talked. Discussions are still going on. But we are looking at roughly around that amount. Yes.
There's significant focus that is needed for universities in Sri Lanka, the education sector, for modernizing education in Sri Lanka, the way we teach and how universities are run in Sri Lanka. Is there any focus on that?
Absolutely, I think. So one thing, President Wickremesinghe is very passionate about education. He was at one point Minister of Education as well. So he really wants to, totally convert the education system in Sri Lanka. He wants more AI-based to move with the, with the current world. So that's, I think, part of what he's trying to do with the debt restructure is to give some leeway. We have 3 years to get some money so that we can use that to do all the reforms that's needed in the education sector, the health sector, the judiciary and everything. So yes, and I think that's what he was also aiming when he spoke with Elon Musk, when he met him in Bali. And so we've been in talks with Starlink so that they will also help provide some connections to our rural schools. Because remember during COVID time, a lot of the students in rural areas could not access the internet because they didn't have proper access. So keeping that in mind, President was asked, when he met Elon Musk, that was one request he did, was, can you all provide some of these connections to our rural schools, and which they have now responded positively on that.
Do we have a timeline of when negotiations will begin and how the implementation process will happen?
Yeah, as soon as possible. They are very keen on coming into Sri Lanka. Right now, I think the TRC is going through the application. We're hoping by end of July that the application will be, all the agreements will be done, and they are ready to come. The negotiations are going on. They are very keen on coming in to help the schools as soon as possible, actually.
Talking about Elon Musk, were there any other discussions focusing on funding or investments in Sri Lanka, particularly because of the amount of investment that an investor as Elon Musk can bring into a country in our situation?
Well, yeah, so we are looking forward to having him in Sri Lanka to launch Starlink here. I think he's already done a bit of research on Sri Lanka. President Wickremesinghe is quite keen on not only having Starlink, but having SpaceX coming here and investing in Sri Lanka as well. So that will be, I think, discussed more when he comes, when Elon Musk comes to Sri Lanka.
What are his aspirations for SpaceX in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think, President Wickremesinghe is looking at, SpaceX as I mean, technology, bringing in technology for, not only bringing in physical technology, but even the education-wise. I mean, it'll help Sri Lankan youth to learn more, to study more on technology. And yeah, I mean, just having Elon Musk come here is enough to open doors for other investors around the world to come into Sri Lanka.
But do you think Sri Lanka's investment climate, our structure of investments and the process is ready to support an investor of that stature?
I think we are ready. So one good thing that has happened, I think, after this whole financial collapse is that we are, to do the reforms in every sector, there is an enthusiasm. So yes, I think, to have, potential investors like Elon Musk coming here, I think Sri Lanka is ready now, yes.
I think it's time we take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park on Other Derana 24. We are in conversation with Ruwan Wijewardene, Senior Advisor to the President on Climate Change and Deputy Leader of the United National Party. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park on Other Derana 24, and we're in conversation with the Senior Advisor to the President on Climate Change, Ruwan Wijewardene. We were discussing about debt restructuring and how climate change, debt for nature swaps could really help Sri Lanka not just mitigate climate change and the impact, but also support Sri Lanka emerge from this crisis. It was revealed that Sri Lanka's domestic debt figures stood at some 17 trillion US dollars as at end 31st December 2023 and increased to 17.25 trillion in March of this year. Again, we have about 5.5 billion US dollars from April 22, the installment, and a debt portfolio stands at 37 billion. A lot of figures here, but I mentioned earlier that developing nations, poorer countries could receive about 100 billion US dollars for climate financing, etc., as per research. But really, how can Sri Lanka use our own institutes to generate the kind of funds that we require? We had a weather calamity, which was not predicted, and Sri Lanka's loss, the compensation and other mitigation measures really could have been saved for some other important purpose, and lives, the impact on the livelihoods could have been saved. Can't we really invest in technology that gives us precision forecast for weather, and also use that kind of data and information to generate more funds to the country's economy? Absolutely,
yeah, very correct. In fact, we've been working with the World Bank. The World Bank is now in the process of funding the government of Sri Lanka to update technology on weather prediction and everything. So I think that'll most probably within this year, I think we'll get all the funds and we can invest in that technology. But yes, I mean there is a lot of options there now for countries like us to access climate finance to help us, face up to all these climate issues. One is like what you talked about, the debt to nature swaps, and so that we've been actually looking at debt to nature swap, but we've been also talking to the central bank, the governor of the central bank, the finance ministry. So at that point, what the discussion was, let's wait till the debt restructuring is done, because if you try to bring in another negotiation into that, it will just confuse the whole thing. So let's wait till we come and finish off the debt restructure and then look at how we can also bring in a debt to nature swap. So now since yesterday, since we have signed this, now it's the time to start looking at, getting the process of debt to nature swaps to go forward. So, those things are there. And of course, there are other green finance methods that we can look into to, strengthen in Sri Lanka to face up to all these climate issues. And this has been an issue in President Wickremesinghe's mind, because when we were in government in 2017, we had in the north of the country we had a drought, and the south part of our country was underwater, and that the loss of lives, the loss on livelihoods, as well as the impact on the infrastructure was tremendous. This is exactly why he wanted to focus a lot on the climate issues and how we can strengthen the economy through that.
Talking about forecast, strengthening our mechanisms, technology, whatever we invest into forecast, are we aware that we don't have enough products to really sell to whether it's the international community or for usage of our airspace, by selling information of our geographical location in terms of flights that use our airspace and weather services? How can we really look at this in a positive manner so that Sri Lanka can improve on our inflows?
So there are so many ways. Actually, Sri Lanka has a lot to offer. If you look at our forest coverage, the carbon market is something that we haven't exactly looked into yet in Sri Lanka, and which we are doing it now. So the private market has been active somewhat, but what we are doing right now is, we are putting up a framework on how we can trade in the international market when it comes to carbon credits. So that is being also now looked into. But there's so many things that the international community is interested when looking at Sri Lanka, is the geographical location, and of course even our ports. So there's a lot of potential, and there's how we can bring in a lot of money into Sri Lanka through climate change initiatives. In fact, the first thing that we did was with President Rashid, with the CVF. We put forward the country prosperity plan, the climate country prosperity plan. And that is to bring in investors to come and invest more on renewable energy projects, on our agriculture, on our irrigation. So it listed out so many projects that they can come and invest on. And that has actually brought in, now we've got a Portuguese company that is coming in to invest in an agriculture project here. Got a lot of renewable energy projects that are going on. So things like that can actually attract investors to come in and invest in Sri Lanka, and that in turn will strengthen the economy.
I'd like to go back to the debt to nature swaps. According to UNDP, some 58 developing countries most vulnerable to climate change face nearly $500 billion in debt repayments over the next 4 to 5 years. And many advocate for this debt for nature. And 20 countries have signaled their intention to halt repayments totaling $685 billion, proposing to swap debt. How much can Sri Lanka look at?
Well, I don't think you can look at the total debt, but that all depends on how we negotiate and who we get to. You need an organization to come in and negotiate for you. So depending on who you take is how they can decide on exactly how much. So yes, but I mean, if you look at countries like Kenya, President Ruto, so many of the African leaders have been saying, look, they've been accusing the global north, actually saying, you all tell us to look at, sustainability, look at our climate goals, But at the same time, we are in debt to you all, and you all don't help us in any way to cut down on that. So that you find a lot of leaders who are now voicing this opinion amongst the global south. And that's why President Wickremesinghe also brought in the Climate Justice Forum, saying that we need justice. We cannot be bogged down in debt all the time. There has to be somewhere where the global north, or the developed countries can come in and help us, cut down on some part of our debt and use that money to secure our environment, so that as well as how we can, face up to climate issues.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been, I think, discussed every year at the COP as well, and the reaction amongst the global South leaders has been each year their voices are raised more and more, and I think it has got the attention of the developed countries now, and I think they will at one point. I mean, they keep pledging money, but sometimes pledging is not enough. You need action. And with all this happening in the world right now, with all the conflicts in Ukraine and of course in Gaza, so one thing that President Wickremesinghe has been saying is, stop putting money into wars. You might as well use that money to help countries like us face up to climate issues. So at one point, I think the global north and the developed countries will have to look at their priorities. If they want the earth to be preserved, the environment to be preserved, it's not only talk, they have to start actually doing something about it properly.
President Wickremesinghe is known to have close links with the Western world. Do you think he will take a strong stand with the West when it comes to these matters?
Yes, he will. I think he has already raised his voice on this. But Mr. Wickremesinghe is also very good at negotiations. I think so more than trying to go for a confrontation with the West, he would rather negotiate and get more out of it to help countries like Sri Lanka.
You spoke about renewable energy, and Sri Lanka's focus is mostly on solar, hydro and wind. Mm-hmm. But have we really not focused on, being an island nation, tidal and ocean energy, where countries like South Korea, Russia and even France have successfully implemented these projects?
Yeah, we've been, so right now we haven't looked into any, starting any projects on tidal wave energy and all. Mm-hmm. Right now, the concentration is mainly on solar and of wind energy. Of course, I think hydro has been there for years. These three are more, for us, more sustainable at the moment. Of course, there's also offshore wind that we've been discussing. And so the thing is, I mean, it's very easy to propose certain, renewable energy projects, but sometimes bringing in a renewable energy project also has an adverse effect on the environment when you're doing a project. For instance, if you're looking at the wind project in Mannar, there's the environmentalists are concerned that it'll affect the migration of the birds into that area. The fishermen are concerned about what kind of impact it'll have on the fishing if you go for offshore wind projects. So there are concerns. So you have to make sure you do a proper study before you start implementing a project. So this is where when it comes to development of a country, sometimes you get ideas from the West, but sometimes when you try to convert those things when you try to implement them in our countries, it can have another adverse effect. So you have to be very careful. But
Yeah, the Climate Change Act is also something that the government is talking about. What are the aspects that will cover?
So, yes, so the Climate Change Act that we are looking at is also what we are basing it on, the Climate Change Act that was presented in the UK Parliament. So we are looking at the UK Act and making it accordingly. But so we are also looking at a new Environment Act. So now we are in discussions with the Environment Ministry. Maybe we can amalgamate the two without having a separate Environment Act as well as a Climate Act.
Right.
Maybe we can have both together. So sometimes if you have two, one can overlap the other. So we have, the secretaries of the ministries, as well as Dr. Wijewardene, who is now the CEO of our climate change office. The senior additional secretary, Dr. Wijewardene, is also. So we are all in discussions at the moment, looking at the recommendations and everything to make sure that we have a good act that we can preserve our environment, as well as look at climate financing, as well as climate mitigation and adaptation. So yeah, we are hoping. Well, the president was looking forward to put forward this act into Parliament sometime next month, in July.
In July. Moving on to talk about your term as the acting Minister of Defence during the time of the previous government. I think former President Maithripala Sirisena continues to make statements about the Easter Sunday attacks, and of course it's a case for the judiciary. But how do you respond to all the claims that whenever the United National Party has been in power or has been part of a power sharing mechanism or government, that you failed national security?
Well, so what you had to understand at that point was President Maithripala Sirisena, as the president of the country, as well as the defense minister. Of course, at that point, he was in loggerheads with our government, with the UNP government. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe and I were not allowed to sit in at the Security Council meetings. In fact, what President Sirisena did was, if he calls the Security Council, then he has to call Prime Minister and me. So he never called the Security Council. So he had private chats with the commanders as well as the intelligence. So we were oblivious to, in that, once we came back into government after the constitutional crisis, we were pretty much cut off. I used to sit at the intelligence committee meetings, but I was not allowed to sit afterwards. So what happened was that the national security was under threat. There was a president who was not thinking right. He was, I think for some bizarre reason, he kept on thinking that he was a target to be assassinated. If I'm not, I remember that pretty clearly, that he kept on saying, I'm the target, I'm the target. But he lost control of national security. And when the Easter attack happened, I remember going to the defense ministry. At the time, President Sirisena had gone off to Singapore. He was not there. He didn't put me as the minister in charge of defense. There was no person in charge of defense when he left. So I went to the defense ministry. We were all absolutely confused at the time. And then, of course, then the state intelligence, everyone came there. And that's when they said, oh no, there was this information that we got from the back channels from India. And so and at that time, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe called me and said he was out of Colombo. And he said, look, I want to talk to the security establishment we need to meet because the president is not in the country. Tell them to come to Temple Trees. I need to meet with the commanders, intelligence and everything. And I kept telling them, no, we have to go to Temple Trees. No movement. They didn't get up. 3 times I said we have to go to Temple Trees to, the Prime Minister we need to talk. They didn't move. And then the 4th time, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe called and said, look, I'm coming there. I feel like I'm coming to Temple Trees. And he came to the Defense Ministry. And at that time, the Secretary of Defense said, so we have been instructed by President Sri Lanka not to speak with you. At a time of a crisis where bombs have gone off, people have died. And President Sri Lanka was playing politics at the time. It is, like I said, he was thinking about himself. He wasn't thinking about the country or the people. And obviously, us being in government at the time, the accusation came to the UNP government, but at the responsibility of national security was in the hands of President Sri Lanka at the time.
I'm told we don't have much time on the show, but just the final question with you. Former President Maithripala Sirisena was a choice of your party, then Mr. Wickremesinghe, and you say that you didn't have much time to get to know him. But going forward, what responsibility will your party take in whoever you nominate as a candidate for a presidential election? And secondly, there was a lot of talk about a Volkswagen factory in Kuliapitiya, and this was all targeting elections. This became a promise that was not fulfilled. Will Starlink and all these other assurances be unfulfilled promises yet again? And thirdly, with an election around the corner, again, I asked you this question: do you think will these whatever introductions, whatever you bring into the country, will be targeting elections, and the United National Party benefiting out of the propaganda?
Right. On President Sirisena, it was not only the UNP. At that point, there was so many others who I think, within the Rajapaksa government, was breaking away. And they, in fact, I think Mr. Wickremesinghe was all ready to come in as the presidential candidate at that time. But we were, there was former President Chandrika, everyone was of the view that there has to be a common candidate to fight President Rajapaksa at the time. And after much discussions within the UNP working committee, in fact, there was a section that was saying, no, we should put Mr. Wickremesinghe as a presidential candidate. But with this breakaway faction also in discussions, and we're saying, look, we will come only if there is a common candidate. So we were compelled to go with Sirisena, Maithripala Sirisena, as our presidential candidate. So yeah, as for Volkswagen and all, yes, it was unfortunate because I think a lot of the plans that we had, a lot of the projects that we wanted to implement got muddled in this whole issue between the president and our government at the time. A lot of the things that we wanted to implement couldn't go forward. Look, we're looking at Starlink. There was this whole issue about Google Loon project at the time. Google Loon project, Mr. Harin Fernando and I were the ones who went to America, spoke with Google. And this was a revolutionary thing. They hadn't tried this before. They thought Sri Lanka was the best because of the size of the country. So we tried to bring in Google Loon project to see if we can give access to the internet for the whole country. But unfortunately, that too, it was President Sirisena through the TRC that kept on blocking. While he met with Chamat Palihapitiya and some of the Google officials, and he was like, yes, I'm supporting this. Through the TRC, he kept on blocking it, and we couldn't take it forward. So this is unfortunate, but we are all right now under the leadership of President Wickremesinghe. We want to bring in all these projects to revolutionize Sri Lanka and take this country forward.
I think that's all the time we have here at Hyde Park, but thank you very much. I know it has been a little tough for you with the bad weather, infections around, viruses, but thank you amidst the difficulty for sharing your thoughts and joining us in conversation at Hyde Park.
Thank you very much.
We were discussing with the Senior Advisor to the President on Climate Change and Deputy Leader of the United National Party, Ruwan Wijewardene, here at Hyde Park on Other Derana 24. We'll see you again next week with yet another conversation. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.